close that. How do we do that? All right. Well, are you all right if we start? Or do you need a minute? Okay. All right, we'll sing a quorum of the Climate Action Subcommittee. I'll call this meeting to order on April 2nd. Climate Action Subcommittee. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call.
Councilmember Okrepke is absent. Councilmember Benuelos
Here.
and Chair Fleming.
Here, thank you very much. All right, we will pass by item 2 since there's no remote participation today and move on to approval of the minutes. Before we go on to approve our minutes from, what date do we have on those minutes?
It was February.
Okay, great. We'll take public comment on the minutes. Seeing none, do we have any amendments? All right, we'll adopt those as written. Item 4, public comment on non-agenda matters, anything that's within our jurisdiction but not on our agenda. This is your chance. Mike?
Yes, thank you. Looks like we're fairly informal here, but on the other hand, I have a short statement I just wanted to read. My name is Mike Turgeon, and I represent Friends of the Climate Action Progress. Our coalition formed back in 2017, right after the Tubbs fire, and for the next 3 years, we worked alongside the city council to form this Climate Action Subcommittee. And we appreciate that the subcommittee has survived COVID, and we thank you for your work. It's remarkable how Santa Rosa truly has adopted a resilient mindset since those awful days during the fall and the winter of 2017. Our group also helped to create the CER, the Climate Emergency Resolution, as well. And it contains the goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2030, 5 years from now. Also in the resolution is a commitment by the city to develop and regularly update a public-facing tracker of progress toward its climate goals. In searching the city website, I couldn't find a recent update. So I look forward to some guidance in that regard. As always, our people, our coalition with Friends of Climate Action Progress are eager to support the work of this vital committee. And as we all know, the timeline for meaningful climate action is set by Mother Nature, and there is no interest on her part for any negotiation. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments? All right. That will take us on to item 5. Here, department reports.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Fleming. I do have just one brief announcement. I just wanted to announce that we'll be having our 16th annual Earth Day Festival on April 26th at Courthouse Square. Feel free to grab some seed packets at the door. All the details are there on it. It will be a family-friendly event with kid activities hosted by Rec and Parks, 40+ vendors and food trucks. If you want to find out more information, go to srcity.org/Earth Day, and that will be April 26th from 12 to 4 at Courthouse Square.
Thank you, Peter. All right. Do we have any, we need to take public comment on this? Does anybody want to comment?
On which part?
On Mr. Martin's comments. Great. All righty. Item 6, new business. Back to you, Mr. Martin.
Okay. Item 6.1 is downtown parking EV implementation plan updates. Chad Hedge, Parking Division Manager, will provide a presentation today. One moment here. Yeah, Commissioner. Yeah. You should be able to drive.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Good afternoon. Chad Hedge, Parking Division Manager. I came here, I believe it was 2023, and gave some updates back then that I thought were going to happen soon as far as our EV infrastructure upgrades that we're working on throughout the city. Some things have changed, and I wanted to make sure that we're all kind of brought up to speed, and we're talking a lot about the steps we're taking to work towards a GHG reduction and making sure that we have public and private EV chargers in the system. Before I jump in, or as I jump into this, we started, the parking received a grant from the MTC last year to work on a comprehensive downtown parking study to address anything from short-term parking on the streets and how we can support developments with the elimination of parking minimums, how we can increase the use of or the availability of EV charger infrastructure, shared parking, a bunch of different things. We're working through that right now. Still with MTC and Sam Schwartz, or TY Lin is their name now. We are also awarded another grant to do a second TOC study on the North Area Smart Station. We wanted to combine both studies and take everything that we learned from the initial downtown Railroad Square study and the North Area Smart Station, so that as we talk about EV infrastructure upgrades, supporting transit, how we can do both sections together instead of doing it piecemeal and making changes as we go forward. One of the interesting things I think that came out of more than 1,500 responses with our study, the most important things to the community who did this study was the distance to the destination at 22.8%, availability of parking spaces, and safety and security of parking spaces. And then pricing came in at fourth at 17.5%. So as we're looking at how we can make parking support all of the city goals, the climate goals, we're going to look at all these things of how we can adjust our services, provide a better service, but then also still be able to provide the security, the maintenance, and the infrastructure upgrades that we have to do for these projects. Some of the things that are to highlight, and I bring this up because of what we're doing with the EV program, our current parking revenues cannot, I think we've all said this lately, but our current parking revenues are not supporting the program, right? All of our revenue, parking revenues at Enterprise Fund comes from residential permits, street parking, and garage parking. That's it. In our attempt to encourage folks to stop circling downtown, reducing GHG emissions and the VMTs, we established first hour free in the garages to try to get folks to park in the garage and not circle around downtown for a parking space. Free holiday weekends, try to encourage folks to come down here and shop and park in the weekend for free in the garages to support our local businesses. Free parklets to help the businesses expand. Roxy validation to where we provide parking for their moviegoers to try to support them to park in garage 12, which is the one right behind the movie theater. All of these things that we've done to try to encourage people to stay off or to do long-term parking in the garages and not on the streets, it hasn't increased the occupancy in our garages. So these steps we're taking to try to improve and change behaviors haven't really, or have not at all moved that needle to get people off the street. A second thing that's kind of impacting what we're talking about as far as street parking, loading zones, ADA spaces, Uber Eats, short terms, is AB 413, which recently came out, that the daylighting law, which means that now we have to eliminate some more spaces entering into a intersection that has a crosswalk to try to prevent folks who aren't having a visible line of sight and accidents. In order to support these new developments, 420 Mendoza is a perfect example. We're eliminating all the parking on Riley Street so that now that we can have fire access and folks who are in that garage there will now have space to get in, so parking won't have an impact on that street. And then also working with multiple different developers for future and current projects to issue permits in our lots in Railroad Square and our garages so that we can attempt to support the residents who won't have any availability to park on site because of the elimination of parking minimums. I mentioned that we're expanding our current MTC parking study. MTC has not identified a contractor yet, but it'll cover the North Area Smart Station. We're working with parking's working with planning. We're working with economic development. We're working with TPW to make sure we we work on our grant and their grant at the same pace, and we're addressing the same goals, so that if we identify something in our parking study, it directly ties to what they're trying to accomplish with the VMT reductions and the TOC items. And we're hoping early 2026, we'll have all the information available to present to council with recommendations. The benefits of all of our programs, of what we're trying to do regarding these, all of the EV infrastructures, we want to try to follow the city's climate action plan. We want to try to follow the city's downtown station specific plan. We want to try to follow Plan Bay Area 2050. We want to try to accomplish these goals. We can tell the community that we want you to have more EV vehicles. We want you to do more long-term parking in the garages, 7th Streets. But if we don't have the EV infrastructure available for folks to use, and not just the level 2 chargers, but also the level 3 chargers, then we're not really providing a service for them, giving them a reason to go to the garages and do this long-term parking. So once again, I brought this, we started this way back in 2023, and a couple of different delays came to part, but we're still pushing forward. And I do believe this year we're gonna break ground for the PG&E EV fleet infrastructure upgrade in Garage 9, which is this garage right here. So the EV fleet program we applied for with PG&E, and we went through all the steps. And so they're going to completely fund a to the meter and behind the meter project to install 6 level 2 dual port chargers in Garage 9 that will be for fleet use. So that'll help support the city's goals of eliminating the internal combustion and going to EV vehicles. We had originally determined or proposed that parking would replace our own vehicles, and then our own vehicles would use those EV chargers. Different hurdles have come in front of us, and we don't think we're going to be able to replace our vehicles on the pace that PG&E wants us to qualify for these funds. So I've been working with other departments, and we're going to work together with other departments to, if they have a vehicle that they replaced, then we can show to PG&E that we replaced this internal combustion engine with an EV, and it's going to charge in this, and that'll help us maintain this Rule 29. Typically, they'll only fund the to the meter, but because this one's so unique and a benefit to the city, that they're actually going to pay for behind the meter too. So the new meter will be right here on the outside wall, the new transformer, and then PG&E will run all the conduit to the new box and to the new chargers that are inside the garage for the EV fleet vehicles. As we work through replacing those 12 city vehicles, those chargers can be used by the public until we get to that point where we have a dedicated 12 vehicles that will be used in those 12 stalls. So it'll benefit the community in the short term. The second one, which just got off the phone with PG&E today, is the PG&E Rule 29 Lot 10 project. Lot 10 is a lot that's directly behind the Russian River Brewery on 5th Street. So this one has morphed over the past few weeks, but what we're able to do now is we're putting in 4 dual port level 2 chargers, so 8 total spaces. And we're also putting in 2 single port DC fast chargers, and there will be for public use. So PG&E plans to break ground August 1st, and they're going to tie into their infrastructure on E Street, come all the way down 5th Street, install a new transformer. Then the city staff will work on getting everything else through that point. So we're hoping chargers will be in ground, ready to use by the end of this year. Both of these projects, the infrastructure costs, the construction costs are being funded through grants through PG&E. The chargers themselves, we're going to be reimbursed. We were awarded grant funds through Communities in Charge. So we will buy the chargers up front, and we'll submit for the reimbursements. That'll help give us the money back to pay for those chargers, which is huge for parking's budget. Another one, and I brought this up in 2023, and once again, it's completely changed, but now we're at a point where we are working with with Tesla again. Originally, Tesla was gonna fund 36 to 40 level 2 chargers. And that's changed now to where Tesla is gonna fund 18 level 3, the DC fast chargers in garage 12, essentially creating a supercharger station in garage 12. And then they'll also fund an additional 18 DC fast chargers in garage 1, which is the garage on First Street over by the California Theater. So this will give us, the city, the opportunity to have 2 separate supercharger stations installed, operating. PG&E will pay all of the ADA upgrades that are required when you do any new projects. They'll pay for all the capital construction costs. They'll pay all the PG&E costs. They'll even pay the electricity costs that are required for those DC fast chargers. And I don't, that's a big amount of money that those, or electricity that those chargers use. This is a project that without Tesla funding, I don't think the city, I'm almost positive parking would never be able to afford something like this. It's probably a couple $1 million per garage to do these projects. The second we put a shovel in the ground at any one of our facilities, and this is citywide, we are required to bring our facilities up to new code standards. So that's going to add a whole bunch of additional cost to any project we do. So this will be huge for us if it goes through. We're still working on some points right now and getting that sent through. And once again, we have currently 22 EV chargers. When I say we, I mean parking areas, not the city, but parking areas downtown. 22, 11 chargers, 22 ports. I'm sure you've seen in Courthouse Square, we have some in Garage 9 and a couple of different garages. All of these items will directly tie to the GHG reduction goals, and by default help to address the parking supply limits. We've tried for years now to reduce circling on some of our busier streets. We've tried to encourage folks to go to the garages to where it's first hour free or 50 cents an hour after that. So we don't want them circling and parking their vehicles right there on the high use areas. And so all of these steps will help to address the goals that were set by the city, the goals that have been set by MTC, the goals that have been set by SCTA. They'll help encourage folks to walk more, which could in turn lead to the better appreciation of what TPW has done recently to put in more bike lanes, more bike racks, hopefully increase transit ridership to make this a more bikeable, walkable community. And as we talk about all these things, the developments are having, as we look at what our current occupancy and what we currently provide as far as a service to the community, businesses, residents, employees, we're also trying to factor in the additional impact from these developments. So as 420 Mendo or 420 Humboldt or the cannery site, as folks are now being directed to park or utilize city property for parking, we don't have the additional EV availability that can support what we're trying to get the community to do. And so as we kind of look forward on what we're trying to do, we had issues before these new developments went to maintain what we have. And now that we have these new developments coming in and we see an increase in permits to support these housing units, what we're hoping is that in the next few years that it will turn into a positive impact, and this revenue that comes in now to Parking Enterprise Fund can go directly or will go directly back into better striping, eliminating parking in certain areas to support the short-term parking, Uber Eats, things like that, more ADAs, the more loading zones that we're going to need to support these communities. But once again, everything we're working through right now is coming from a deficit that we've had. So right now we're just trying to get to that point where we can support our current services, acknowledging that it's about to grow exponentially with all these new parkers coming in. We've been working really hard with economic development, a great partnership. We're working on art and public spaces. We're working with them on the public art walk, and we're going to go to the Arts and Public Places Committee. We're working on events possibly in the garages. We're doing all these things to try to encourage people to come downtown, support the city. They're city property, they're city spaces that aren't going anywhere. We need to support them to make sure that they're safe and they're well lit. And that it's a community gathering space, not just a big old concrete structure. Arts and public spaces, we talked about, we've got numerous art projects. We've got one that I'm hoping comes through soon, working with the Redwood Chinese Empire Association, that we're going to do a giant mural right here, once again on Garage 9, on the side of Garage 9. And we're going to try to set up a giant celebration to celebrate the old Chinatown site with this mural. And it will be amazing. But it's what we're working on to bring public art into the blank garage walls, or rotating art exhibits throughout the streets. We've had multiple lots where we have art installed already, and we're working with economic development and their team to rotate art, right? Bring up new ideas for art to try to make people want to walk through these areas and support the community. And we're also working with, we're in talks to set up a park and ride system to help support the airport. We're trying to think outside the box and do more. And then once again, this is the same question I asked when I brought this, I believe in 2023, is, for the committee, what do you see as a concern regarding parking? What discussions have you had with your guests and business owners, whether we're talking about occupancy, availability, or the EV availability? Where do you rank the need to install more EV chargers? And what is required for your support? And then the EV car on the last page.
Thank you, very much appreciated. Do we have any questions?
Oh, my gosh.
You have a lot of parking in your district.
Well, a lot of lack of parking in my
Yes,
district.
we got another call today, yeah.
I have and which checked into our meeting recently, not our meeting, the neighborhood association meeting, so. So I know some of it, that parking is an issue as these developments get filled up, which is great. And I'm just for everyone else's purposes, what is happening is the people that already live there don't have any place to park in the evening. Some of them work at night and they come home, and these are older homes. And so many of them don't have garages, or they've been converted, I guess, at some time. So they come home and they have no place to park because, for example, the Pullman, both phase 1 and 2, all those folks park. I mean, if you go there at night, every single space at night is taken by folks who probably live in the development. So, and that's just one. And so they're anticipating the same problem, unfortunately, with the cannery for Pearson Street, because it's going to be the same issue. And so we discussed that for quite a bit, and trying to think of some things that could help the residents that already live there. And I think, and this is also actually, in terms of my district on College, there's another development right near Safeway, which is market rate development. Same thing, there's a quiet street, which I'm very familiar with because I have friends that live down on Manhattan that when they come home at night, they have no place to park because of the parking situation. So, and I know, I've talked to a few people that live in San Francisco, and they're like, well, of course, we never have parking. What are you complaining about? And that is true. That is true that we all know in San Francisco, it's really, you got to plan to go there because it's really hard to park there. But that's something that we're not used to in Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're starting to deal with as we start to meet our housing goals. How can we also make sure that the folks that already live in the existing neighborhoods have places to park and that they're taken care of as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest concern. And then I would imagine, I know there's better planning, at least for downtown with the different garages. There are places for people to go as opposed to some of these neighborhoods. So that, as in terms of your first question, that's probably the biggest concern that I keep hearing about. Yeah, I'll stop talking now.
You can have the floor as long as you like. There aren't too many issues for parking in my district. I have a little bit of downtown, including the garage just north of Russian River. And sometimes there are some issues with the permitting around the junior college. And that can be a little bit of an issue because I think that the residents in that part of the city don't feel like they're necessarily in a commercial zone. And so when we deal with commercial permitting, and you and I have been in communications about it. I do have a question going back to the garage usage. I think it's great how much effort you're putting into getting the garages to be useful, to reduce our VMTs and to encourage people not to park in front of businesses as much as possible. But you said I got the impression that maybe there's some challenges in getting those upgrades. Is there any more information you can give us about the process and timeline?
What do you mean upgrades? I'm sorry.
The EV infrastructure.
Gotcha.
The new charging stations, what's the timeline on that?
So yes, it's a great point. The reason I'm here again in 2025, when I started this in 2023, were the constant issues I had with getting applications approved through PG&E, getting the approved load plans through PG&E, getting a start date on the project for PG&E. Since we had the Rule 29 project approved and the PG&E EV fleet project approved, as of today, it seems like things are moving forward, but keep in mind, it took me 2 years to get to this point. And if I wasn't able to get those grants from MTC and Communities in Charge, we would not be able to afford any of this work.
Well, yeah, I know our budget's really constrained. Mike Turgeon made a really good point earlier. Our climate challenges are, don't factor into consideration, our bureaucratic or PG&E's bureaucratic slowdown. So thank you for persisting and pursuing this. And if you find that you get stuck in the future, please do reach out to us and we can try to work with PG&E and see if we can encourage them to help us meet our goals before they cause another wildfire.
Yeah.
Right? And go bankrupt again. So, what's required for my support is just a continued laser focus on the purpose of what the subcommittee is doing, which is to, do our best to protect our climate and our shared futures. And parking in cars are not necessarily a priority for us in beyond reducing their impact
Yes.
on our communities and making our communities more walkable. And I think that you're really focused on that and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll open it up for public comment. Yes.
I really support the EV chargers that you're putting in, but not at the expense of tree canopy and green spaces. And can you bring up a slide for lot 10? Only, please.
Yeah.
Sharing the public comment.
Yeah,
Do you have the slide for lot?
No.
10?
I can,
Oh, you can't bring it up.
well, if you want to take the timer down, I'll just,
Well, that's okay.
you'll just be at my mercy.
Yeah, it's a minor thing, but it would, the visual would really help, and that is,
give me 1 second. Did you say slide 10?
It's lot 10.
there you go. Yeah, so as I said, I really support the charging stations, but not in place of tree canopy and green spaces. And if you look at this is lot 5. Those trees are not there now. They're all cut down. And as far as I know, there wasn't really a definitive plan on replacement of those trees. And I think it's incumbent upon us to really look at renewable solutions for the climate crisis, along with nature-based solutions. And I think that's really grossly forgotten in what we're doing. So I'm frustrated in that regard, and I'll just leave it there. The second point I want to make is if you want to encourage more parking in parking lots, discourage rotating around in your car and encourage bike pedestrian traffic, close down 4th Street from B to E Street. That's a start. You would solve all those problems. It would create business for businesses there because you slow down traffic. They pay attention to new businesses. They stop and support them. So I just want to put that out there, that would be a very quick solution. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Derek Knowles. I live in the junior college neighborhood. Yeah, to Mike's point, in the time I've been here, nothing's inspired more indignation and fervor, honestly, than the trees that Chad oversaw that were removed from this parking lot, which also included 3 legacy redwood trees. The fact that that happened without community oversight, with a murky sense of why the removal happened. I heard this repeatedly from neighbors, downtown merchants, and people like myself who now are going to have to live with the consequences this summer of a heat island that's been created by that removal. And while there might have been legitimate reasons to do that, and I was able to speak with Chad, as I know others were, and unfortunately those conversations didn't really graduate beyond initial conversations. These need to be democratic decisions. I'm a little skeptical of the analysis of GHG reductions in encouraging more driving when those don't take into account the carbon offset from redwood trees, for example. Those aren't factored in. I'm sure we're not factored in at all to that analysis. So the stakes are so high at this point, and to Mike's point, I don't think we can be solving the climate crisis by doubling down on the same issues and the same dynamics and tendencies that created it in the first place. And so I see the lot downtown as sort of symptomatic of ways in which we can be thinking more creatively and again, more democratically to address a lot of these challenges. So
So sorry.
That's the timer.
yeah.
Tell your thunder.
So going forward, again, I would really encourage more true community input around decisions like that really impact, I mean, they impact all of us. They impact non-humans. And it's ironic to me that happens too in the backyard of Russian River Brewery, which we all love and celebrate. There's been people lining up every morning now for like,
Oh,
geez.
I'm gonna have to break it so that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Can't get it to-
Right.
So anyway, I think that EV charger is great, all for them, but there's got to be more creative thinking around how we're going to address real greenhouse gas reduction. And again, I don't think that can be done with, the automobile is antithetical to that project, unfortunately. It's maybe a necessary evil to a degree, but yes, the delicious irony of EV chargers being placed in a parking lot that had, dozens of trees removed, it is almost, I can see why people are upset. So I just wanted to offer that, and I'm looking forward, Chad, to continue chatting about ways that we could maybe, again, be creative about, again, nature-based solutions or preventing similar occurrences in the future.
Thank you. Yes, and we probably should get the timer back up because I don't want to rely on Michael's phone. any longer.
Yeah, thank you.
Or my whims. Yes.
I'll be quick. I'm Chris Gunther, co-lead of Bikeable Santa Rosa. I want to second Mike and Kyle's comments. I also want to connect back to, I appreciate, Chad, that you mentioned some of the kind of larger goals of getting folks circulating downtown, economic development, vibrancy, community strength. Obviously, I think when we lose the tree canopy, that's impacted. And I've been through there a number of times with Taco Tuesday and other events, and somebody's always commenting like the loss is still felt. I did see at the bottom of that slide, there was a reference to some rethinking about landscape plans.
Yes,
I'm hoping you're going to say that that's somewhat in response to this.
yes.
Because I think that, even after the charges are in, I think there's a lot of possibilities in that lot. And I think we should be thinking, forward about that. But I just wanted to reiterate that I try to remind the council all the time that even though we're Bikeable Santa Rosa, it's not really about the bikes. The bikes are just a sort of leading indicator of the kind of city that we want to live in. And it sounds like you're pursuing that as well. And I just hope we can work together in the future to avoid sort of being at cross purposes on some of those implementations.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Pam McLean. I just have a couple of quick questions. Early on, you talked about the garages and trying to encourage people to use them more. I was wondering if you could tell me a little more specifically what you've done to promote the use of garages as opposed to driving around in circles, letting people know that there's free periods. And then the second question is about working with developers. With apartment buildings, if people want to buy an SUV or want to buy an EV, it's often really difficult if they live in apartments and they don't have any way to get a charger nearby. What are you doing, or what is the city able to do to encourage developers to put in EV access in apartment buildings?
So thank you for your questions. I will pose them to him after we're done with
Thank you.
public comment, so we don't get engaged in a back and forth.
Right.
Any additional public comment? All right, we will now close public comment. Mr. Hyde, would you please respond to those questions?
Sure. So the first question, how are we encouraging folks to use the garages more often? So we started that process, I want to say at least 2.5, if not 3 years ago, by making the first hour free in all 5 of the garages to try to encourage folks to go to the outer areas and spend more time in the garages. Our garages are a fraction of the cost of street parking as well, because we want folks to park in these garages and stay for hours at a time. We have increased security patrols in all of our garages. We have increased lighting in all of our garages. We are doing a project today in this garage where we're painting new retro or reflective lines. We're doing everything we can to encourage folks to use the city facilities that we've had for decades and enjoy everything that Santa Rosa has to offer. As far as what are we parking doing to encourage developments to install EV to support their tenants? Parking is not making or enforcing any policy as it comes to planning requirements. The state has made it very desirable to build a development and not have to provide parking, which is very expensive to build on-site parking. So I think that they have made a lot of changes to support growth of developments, not necessarily the EV, the solar, the geothermal, assuming that cities will incorporate that into their future plans to support these projects, which is what we're trying to do with these EV projects.
Wonderful. All right, that concludes, do you have any additional comments?
Not right.
Okay, that concludes this item. We are now on item 6.2, EV fleet infrastructure master plan update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Fleming. The next item is EV Infrastructure Master Plan Update. Presenting today is me, Peter Martin, Deputy Director of Water Resources, Maddie Brandt, Sustainability Coordinator, also from the Water Department, and Brent Johnson, the consultant from NV5 working on the project. Arthur.
Yep. Can you hear me?
I also wanted to just introduce Arthur Singh, who's also available via Zoom, who's also one of the project leads on. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting this up here. So yeah, I'll kick this off. This is a project that we started about a year ago. We are under a mandate from the state to transition a substantial portion of our operational fleet to zero emission vehicles. So we are conducting a study on what that looks like. And then when I say operational fleet, I mean specifically water, transportation, public works, rec and parks, as well as planning and other services downtown as well. Just wanted to introduce the team. So Santa Rosa has myself, and Maddie Brandt is the project manager for this project. Brent Johnson, Vice President from NV5, is here in the building today, and Arthur Singh is available online on Zoom. There are several other folks, including the subconsultant, Center for Transportation and Environment, a nonprofit who is also providing support on this project. I do also want to point out that this is a substantial effort across all the city departments, so there has been quite a bit of contributions from fleet, public works, as well as our finance team, many of the folks that are in here today as well. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Maddie to introduce the project background.
Thank you. So as Peter mentioned, this project was initiated about a year ago, and we developed the citywide fleet electrification master plan. Part of the initiation of this project was the application for the federal funding from the Department of Energy for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Program. And then the remainder of the funds for this project were supported by the general fund. As Peter also mentioned, the water department is heading this project as project management, but we've been working really closely with the interdisciplinary team that was developed during our RFP process, and we've had a lot of support from the other city departments. We anticipate the final report for this project later this year in July. Part of the goals of this project is to maintain compliance with the new state regulations that have come from the California Air Resources Board, CARB, and they have promoted the Advanced Clean Fleet regulations. This goal includes strategy for continuing all of our existing fleet operations and city services while converting vehicles to EV. And we are prioritizing this integration with our own city-owned facilities. So the two regulations that were put forward by CARB, the first includes the California Advanced Clean Car, which is aimed at light-duty class 1 to 2A vehicles, those that weigh less than 8,500 pounds. This regulation is directed at sellers, so they are encouraged to increase a percent of vehicles sold to consumers as EVs. The second regulation that pertains to local and state government fleets is the California Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation, and that applies to those larger Class 2B vehicles that are greater than 8,500 pounds. This regulation was initially aimed federally and at private fleets. However, that regulation would have required a waiver from the EPA from CARB, and they have since rescinded that request. There are some exemptions to this regulation. The current timeline we are interested in is the January 1st, 2024 regulation started And we are required to purchase 50% EV vehicles. And then by January 1st of 2027, they will require us to purchase 100% of EV vehicles to maintain compliance with this regulation. As an introduction to the city fleet, we have 383 total vehicles across all city departments. To break this down, water is responsible for 45% of these vehicles, while the general funded departments are responsible for the other 55%. These vehicles are stationed at 17 locations across the city, maintained by 7 different departments. However, a majority of these vehicles reside at 7 primary locations. And if you look at the graph on the bar graph to the right, you can see the majority of these vehicles are broken down into their light, medium, heavy duty, and then construction and non-road type vehicles. That was my portion, and I'd like to turn this over to Brent.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
So I think Arthur and I are gonna tag team this. Arthur's done a lot of the heavy lifting on this. So Arthur, you wanna give it a go? Yeah, I can kick it off. So we're the consultants for this project. We help plan for the transition of the vehicles to electric vehicles. I can talk a little bit about the assumptions for right now. So we plan for the vehicles to be replaced with electric vehicles at the end of their planned service life, and only if a feasible and suitable model is available. So what we mean by that is a suitable electric vehicle is one that exists for the same vehicle type. So for example, if we're talking about replacing a pickup truck, whether an electric pickup truck exists in the same weight class as well. And feasible means that that electric model can meet the daily driving demands of Santa Rosa's fleet. So for example, if a pickup truck currently is driven for 150 miles a day and an electric version only drives for 100 miles, then that is not suitable. So we kind of look at these two factors. And for the first few years, there might be quite a few vehicles that are needed to be replaced simply because they are over their service life. And so we spread the replacements out over the first 4 years just to spread out the cost a little bit. We also plan for a cap of around $10 million in vehicle purchase cost per year. This is just to spread out the cost of the vehicle purchase because sometimes there might be a few years where a lot of vehicles coincide in replacement years and cause some spikes in vehicle purchase cost. And so we put a cap in it to spread out the cost a little bit. And on the right side, about the cost of the electric vehicles, we reference current market prices for vehicles that are available on the market. And for those that are not commercially available yet, that is in the medium and heavy duty vehicle weight classes, we assume that they are around 2.5 times the price of internal combustion engine vehicles. And that's based on interviews we've had with electric vehicle dealers. And then we project out the prices of electric vehicles to the future based on studies done by the International Council on Clean Transportation. They're a nonprofit research organization that does a lot of research on clean transportation. Next slide. So one of the first things that I wanted to bring up is that we are seeing quite a bit of mismatch between what California Air Resources Board considers as available as an electric vehicle and what we believe is suitable for replacements. So for example, California Air Resources Board considers vehicles that electric vehicles, chassis that can be outfitted with a pickup body truck as suitable, whereas in many cases, these vehicles may not serve the needs of a city's fleet with towing capacity, payload capacity, need for four-wheel drive, those kind of requirements. And so over on the right side, we're seeing that within Santa Rosa's fleet, around 202 of those are regulated by Advanced Clean Fleet. So these are the Class 2B and above vehicles. Within them, only 12 are considered exempt from California Air Resources Board, or rather granted a categorical exemption. So when we request exemption in the future, you might have to provide proof, additional proof. So for example, how many miles are driven in a year, how much payload is typically needed for these vehicles to justify getting the exemptions from this rule. Next slide. So on the left table here, it's quite a bit of detail, so I'll kind of go row by row. The second row here is the 50% and 100% zero emission vehicle purchase requirements for certain years. As Maddie said, the requirement goes to 100% from 2027 onwards. And we've planned out some of the vehicle replacements by year. And so, for example, in the ACF regulated fleet, we're expecting in 2025 that you might make 3 electric vehicle purchases compared to 35 internal combustion engine purchases. And that turns out to be an 8% compliance, whereas the rule regulates 50%. And just to dive deeper into that a little bit, majority of this is because we're seeing that there is no electric vehicle available as a replacement. So these are pickup trucks that are in the heavier duty category, not the F-150 Lightning category, but rather in the 1 and a 1.5 ton pickup group. And the 3 vehicles, sorry, that we're purchasing as electric vehicles, they are available to be purchased in the current year. And so we're seeing quite a bit of insufficient market availability in the EV categories that is leading to these not meeting the targets of the ACF. And so kind of year by year, we're seeing that it's difficult to comply with the ACF targets until we get to around 2030, where we actually meet the 100% requirements. And that's because that's kind of the year that we start seeing more market availability in terms of the pickup trucks, EV pickup trucks. Next slide. And Arthur, I think another point, just in these early years, it's really going to be a lot of conversation with CARB and a lot of requesting exemptions where we just don't see those vehicles in the market. And like Arthur said, it's payload, what they can carry on the vehicle, what they can tow, and the 4-wheel drive. So there's a real hole in that market and in the market in that class range, and we're seeing a lot of municipalities struggling with this. Yeah, thanks, Brent.
Could I be recognized for a second? Could we take a brief recess?
Sure.
Thank you.
I apologize. No worries. All right, we'll bring this meeting back to order at 4:55 PM. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Okrepkie is absent, Councilmember Benuelos,
Here.
and Chair Fleming.
Here, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll return to item 6.2.
Arthur?
Okay, I'm back. So
This is the trajectory that we are expecting, or at least one of the trajectories that we're seeing Santa Rosa's fleet conversion from internal combustion engine to electric vehicle fleet. It's just kind of a gradual conversion until 100% at 2040. And this is,
I think another point to make here is this is your entire fleet. So it's both the vehicles that are subject to ACF, but also the advanced clean cars, which are your light duty vehicles as well, are shown in here. Right now, there's no rule on converting those like ACF, but the dealers are increasingly going to have to sell more and more EVs. So there's gonna be market scarcity. And then at 2035, dealers right now are supposed to only sell EVs. So this is showing your complete fleet transition. Next slide, Arthur.
yep. So the next slide, this one is focused on, okay, so now that we have planned for the electric vehicle fleet trajectory over time, how many electric vehicle chargers do we need? And so for each of the dwellings or depots that the vehicles are parked in, we've calculated how many chargers is needed based on a few things. So it's based on how many days a typical electric vehicle can be driven before the next charge. And this determines the electric vehicle to charger port ratio, since they can share the same charger. And the second quantity is how much power the chargers need to dispense to charge an electric vehicle overnight. So for example, just as an example, light duty vehicles typically only need level 2 chargers. So on this graph, we're saying they are 16.6 kilowatt chargers, and perhaps they can be driven 3 days before the next charge. And so we only need one charger among 3 of these light duty vehicle, and we'll have them share, one charger. So this just sharing with you as we plan the chargers for 3 phases, around 3 to 5 years between each phase, how many chargers are needed in total. And also just as a rule of thumb, but also we did an analysis. Level 2 chargers are typically sufficient for light duty vehicles, and level 3 chargers, which are 30 kilowatts and 60 kilowatt chargers in our case, is needed for the medium and heavy duty vehicles.
And those power levels are a lot less than what you're looking at for like your Tesla chargers. They're still higher power, but they're enough to get a vehicle charged overnight. And you'll see later, this represents some significant capital expense for the city to put in all this infrastructure, as you can imagine.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. And this is just one of the examples of a site plan that we've developed for the Santa Rosa sites. This is at Municipal Services Center North. This is one of the 8 EV charger site plans we've developed. MSE North, it does have the largest number of chargers and vehicles, so this is one of the larger sites. This site, for example, will need 10 level 1 chargers, and these are typically chargers for golf carts, for utility vehicles, so very small vehicles. 36 level 2 charger ports for the light duty vehicles, and 38 charger ports for the medium and heavy duty vehicles. So this is just a sample layout.
And this represents almost 2 megawatts of new load that we'll be requesting from PG&E, as well as multiple other charging sites and or charging at adjacent sites here.
This slide is showing you as we transition to an electric vehicle fleet, how much energy is consumed per year. On the left side, we're seeing gasoline gallon equivalents in terms of energy. And the baseline is maintained at the current year's fleet, that black line horizontal. And so it's staying the same every year. But as we transition to electric vehicles, they are more energy efficient. And so you are seeing a lower and lower energy consumption per year. And then on the right side, that is the fuel consumption in terms of cost. And so on the baseline, fuel cost is increasing over time because we are expecting gasoline, diesel, all those costs to increase. And on the transition scenario, the energy use is increasingly becoming electricity cost, and they are also increasing, but at a lower rate compared to gasoline, diesel costs. And also one thing I wanted to bring up is that we are, of course, the Santa Rosa is right now subscribed to the Evergreen Sonoma Clean Power rate, which has zero emission electricity. So as we transition to a fully electric vehicle fleet by 2040, the tailpipe emissions will become zero. This slide is talking about the cost of the adoption of electric vehicles. And so the gray on the bottom is maintaining a business as usual fleet. So it's just purchasing more combustion engine vehicles. And then the light green part is the electric vehicle incremental cost. So that is the difference in cost we're seeing when you buy an electric vehicle compared to a combustion engine vehicle. And then the darker green color is the cost of installing EV chargers. And so the cost of the EV chargers as well as the cost of refueling your vehicles. So there is a very small negative line on the EV charger incremental cost. And that's because electric vehicles are cheaper to refuel compared to fossil fuel cars. But it's quite dominated by the cost of the charger installations and the electric vehicle incremental costs. On the right side, we're showing you the nominal cost increase of this fleet transition is $38 million. Majority of that is from the incremental cost of the electric vehicles at 28 million, and the chargers installation costs would be around 10 million across all the years. What we've included in the cost calculation is the PG&E electric vehicle fleet incentives, which is around $500,000. What is not included in here is the Federal Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. That is valued at around $2.4 million. We've kept that out because the status of that tax credit is a little uncertain. There's also the Communities in Charge program, which is valued at around $400,000. Those programs come and go, so they might be available depending on when we apply for those programs. And there are also other various incentives from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, from the utility Sonoma Clean Power, and from HVIP, which is an incentive program from the Air Resources Board. So other incentives come in and out, so it depends on when we apply to those programs.
I think the big take home here is there's a big delta, right? And can't do business as usual if you follow the ACF rules by CARB. So the gray line is just, if you were going to totally ignore them, which can't as a public entity. So you've got a big cost differential to overcome there.
Mhm.
I think that segues into you.
Yeah, Peter. Okay, so I am gonna take this home. So obviously, we're at a point here where we've made quite a bit of progress, the consultant team, on a lot of the analysis around fleet transition, as well as the charging infrastructure necessary for compliance with the rules. So today we are looking for some input from the subcommittee so that the consultant can prepare, obviously, for bringing this to the full council in the summertime here. So I'm going to go through a few slides specific to some of those items that we're looking for input on. And those are centered around just an understanding. As you can see, there is a funding gap there as well. And we can talk a little bit about that and some opportunities. Talk a bit about strategies for compliance with the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. Those include a few options, including delaying purchases and pursuing exemptions or buying equivalents. And then also talk about strategies for actually implementing capital projects to install chargers, since those will compete with other capital projects for the city as well. So as you can tell, Arthur went through some of the items that we purposefully excluded because of the uncertainty around funding options. I think we feel pretty strongly, and we have actually, Transit has submitted an application. We're looking at another application of going through PG&E's EV fleet rule. This is an opportunity where PG&E will go ahead and do their work up to the meter, and also some improvements and incentives behind the meter as well for charging at public facilities. This is time limited, so this money will run out in terms of what PG&E set aside for the program. So the city is actively pursuing these applications and likely will participate in this program. As Arthur mentioned too, the Communities in Charge funding opens and closes at times, so the city will continue to look for opportunities there as well. We're at a point with the transition in the federal landscape where the federal incentives that have been contemplated when we initially started this study are likely not going to be available for the purchase of those vehicles. The program through Carl Moyer from the Air Quality District is currently closed. We don't know when that may return. And then Sonoma Clean Power has at times offered charging for the city fleets as well. And we have at times taken advantage of some free chargers that they offer as well. But again, there is no large public funding resource that is available today that is going to save us, I think, or so we need to think strategically. And so that leads into my next slide. There are options that we can look at. I do have fleet here as well as the finance team. One of the items, as you can see in some of those earlier slides, there is a timeline for which we will pursue compliance, is to delay EV purchases immediately. A lot of that has to do with the fact, as was laid out in the presentation, there are not EV equivalents yet for some of our heavier duty vehicles that are required by this piece of this rulemaking. There is some risk associated with that, of course, and that the higher maintenance costs to continuing to operate older vehicles and not replacing them with internal combustion engine equivalents, and operating beyond their designed life. There's some risk inherent with that. The other option is, where it makes sense, go ahead and have staff continue to pursue exemptions. We have not pursued exemptions to date for any of the medium and heavy duty vehicles that are going to be subject to this rule. A lot of those around, maybe the market doesn't have a vehicle, for instance, that you have a vehicle that needs to travel 150 miles a day under a full load. The market only gives you, say, 100 miles a day. So you would end up with a vehicle that doesn't serve the existing purpose any longer, right? And then the other option too is to follow the rules to the T with CARB's requirements. Take van chassis, say, where they may not necessarily be serving the same purpose, and upfit those van chassis to achieve equivalent of, say, a 3/4 ton or above truck that doesn't exist in the market. And then finally, to the last point is, how are we going to implement all this capital projects on top of the existing mandates and projects that we have in the queue, for all the services the city provides? One of those options that the consultant can look at is what's called charging as a service. This would be a public-private partnership where you would look for an external company to handle the installation, the software, and maintenance of all the charging infrastructure at city facilities. Essentially, what happens is the rate and the cost associated with that is bundled and charged over time to the utility. Eventually, the city would eventually obviously take over ownership of those. And it would allow them to determine a fleet electrification funding mechanism that works on our schedule And there are options of design, bid, build, to achieve these compliance requirements and actually install charging infrastructure. This is something the city is trying to get more familiar with the design build concepts. But this would be fully an external partner doing the work and charging us back over time. So with that, I am looking at least for your thoughts on those items today. And we have, as I mentioned, the staff here can reply to anything specific to the analysis that we're doing for the fleet. But we also have fleet staff as well as finance staff for any other questions you may have.
So these are questions?
Yes, so we're looking for, just your understanding of, city is going to try to focus as much as we can on pursuing outside funding. It is
I'm just
short.
wondering do you have a slide with what the inputs that you want?
Yes, so I'm just asking, for these three slides, how you feel about sort of the financing component, the compliance timelines, and as well as the item about public-private partnership.
Okay. If you have a slide that's concise about what it is you want, I think it was the last one.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. That's not exactly what you just said, but we'll give you feedback. If
Okay.
you need more feedback, let us know. It's a lot to hold while we're doing all this. Do you have questions before we get to public comment?
Not questions, no. Well, I mean, I guess it's an unfunded mandate, right? Okay, so. And I know our finance folks are here, so I'm really anxious to hear what they have to say. But you're looking for direction from us in terms of when you want to take it to the council, right?
Correct, yeah, and obviously the consultant is at a point where they're trying to build things into their forecasts and analysis to close the door on those so that we can bring them to the council.
And then we have vehicles that don't even, I mean, there are vehicles, some of them don't even exist yet that we are being required to replace at some point.
Yeah, I think CARB is going to say there's a vehicle in the market that can do what you need it to do. And you have to decide how much you want to push back on CARB and ask for exemptions. And in a lot of cases, these vehicles can't tow, they can't handle the payload. So you're gonna have a good example of why they don't work for you. But I think your near-term solution has to include some level of exemptions.
Okay.
You see, and I should specify, this is, where the light duty vehicles are treated separately. This is really focused on those 8,500 pounds or more vehicles. So we will continue to purchase light duty vehicles as they become available. It's really trying to figure out these heavier duty solutions that are still yet to prepare to the market.
Good to know. Do you have any public comment?
Can I ask the council to ask a question about whether a consideration was given to building awnings over where EVs would be parked and the charging stations and putting solar on top and a battery? Because I know that would be a huge it would be an upfront cost, but would significantly lower the price of maintaining the vehicles in the long run. So I wondered if that was an option.
Do you have any additional public comment?
Yeah, has there been any discussion on the chargers having a 110 outlet for EV bicycles? Because that industry is really growing and I've not seen that incorporated, and it seems like something that is a no-brainer. Maybe I'm missing a lot, but that would really fill a void for a lot of folks so they don't get stranded.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close the public comment. Would you answer these questions?
I can answer both these questions if you like. So we did ask the consultant, we did not bring this analysis before you today because it's still in the works, but there is a resiliency component to this study. So they are looking at solar with battery, also some of the generator sets. One of the most important things of an operational fleet, as you can imagine for a city, is that if power is out for an extended period of time, you still need to be able to operate that fleet. So Part of that is looking at solar and battery options at different facilities. There will be layouts as well as some of the capital costs associated with creating that resiliency piece as well. And then to the second question about outlets for bicycles, this study is, singularly focused on charging the city's fleet. So we, and also compliance with the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. So we did not look at the lighter charging nor public charging infrastructure.
Right. That makes sense and is perhaps a topic for another day, but great questions from the public. I'll just start by stating the obvious here, which is that this is a worthy endeavor without any funding behind it in a particularly difficult financial climate. So and furthermore that Councilmember Banuelos and myself are not necessarily representative of the average climate ambitions of the council. And so we have to be mindful in our direction to staff of what will be effective and ultimately pass when it does go to the council, and are probably not reflective of our true climate ambitions. So with that, I will open it up to your comments.
I mean, we would, without even hearing from the finance folks over there in the corner, I see that, some of the choices that we have, I guess, with the PG&E and pursuing exemptions. We're gonna have to look basically at all those things as far as trying to fund this. Because as you said, it's definitely a worthwhile thing. We have to do it, but it's also very worthwhile in terms of our climate goals. So, Chair Fleming is right. I want us to do this, but I also recognize that we are really limited in terms of our funding right now. And even looking into the near future over the next 5 years. So, and where all of this kind of falls in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So, that's what I see right now is that a delay in EV purchases to the extent that we can, even though we really don't want to do that. But applying for exemptions, and then one thing that will slow us down to some extent is the fact that some of these vehicles don't even exist yet. So especially in the heavy trucks. So my feeling is, of course, we need to pursue this, but I also recognize that we have to figure out how to pay for it, just like with everything else that we're trying to do right now. So
well said. I don't know that I'll be able to add more to that. I know you asked for quite a range of input, but I think it's really pretty simple. The market doesn't provide and neither do our coffers. And so, I have heartburn over the part about our coffers. I can't control the market. If we had more money, perhaps we could induce demand, but a lot of cities are in the same place and CARB is going to have to figure out how to deal with the deluge of exemptions that are going to come in. And I feel personally like you have my full support to go forward with exemptions. And if we end up frankly being out of compliance because something doesn't exist, we're not, I can't remember that show where they did all those cool retrofits on cars, but that's not the business that we're in here of retrofitting vehicles. If we had gobs and gobs of money, I'd say, go forth and hire some vehicle artists and trick out those, sewer vehicles. I can't wait to see them, but that's not what we're here to do. So it pains me to say that I think we need to double down on exemptions and we need to figure out right now is a kind of a silly time, not on your part, but on my part to be planning for a financial future that involves any sort of federal partnership. I think we, and even, earlier we're talking about Tesla being involved. Who knows what's going to go on as, we see disinvestment in our electric future and how long that's going to persist for. So as far as I'm concerned, we should keep our plans warm, but not be making any major investments that we can't cover in the long run until we have a full picture, which I'm guessing we'll have a clearer picture of where things are going to go by the end of next year. one hopes, because I don't know how long we can live in this level of uncertainty over which none of us have any control. One hopes. Right.
And one last item,
Yes. What else could we do?
Are you comfortable with the consultant presenting options for charging infrastructure where through a public-private partnership instead of the city designing,
Yeah.
building and owning it?
Yeah, well, I'm not opposed to that, but what I don't understand yet is what the potential financial upside downside is to us. Is that gonna be something that we're gonna be hurting over in some years when we could have built our own, or is it gonna, for a private entity to come into it, there has to be an incentive, which means we're gonna have to pay money, right? So,
Yeah, do you want to speak?
You're basically, transferring a capital cost to an operating cost.
mhm,
And it's a private entity. They don't want to make money. So they're going to build that profit into that operating cost. So
Right.
rather than, right now we're showing this infrastructure coming in, the cost coming in 26, 27, as you build these chargers at multiple sites. So if you want to delay that capital expense and spread it over time, this is basically how you would do that.
it's a delayed expenditure. Is the expenditure in the end the same?
It's going to be higher because you've got a private entity that's going to make money on this. So you want to step carefully into any one of these arrangements and really, unpack it and understand what you're signing up for.
Right.
But it is a
Yeah.
way to move a capital cost into an operating cost.
Yeah, I tend to think that overall, we do better when we maintain control. But I can't begin to imagine the cost. I'm sure it was on a slide. I think that's a question that's best answered by the full council because it's a really big expenditure.
Keep it on the table.
I would keep it on the table. I would
Yeah,
ask
I
the
would agree.
council. I'm probably lean in favor of doing it ourselves if we can afford to, but I can see both sides of it. I'd like to have input from my colleagues.
And I think the 26, 27 cost, Arthur, are you still on? But I think we were on the order of 6.5 million. All right.
Yeah, let me track it up real quick.
We've got the chart with the green above it
Mhm,
and a big part of that upfront cost or the infrastructure cost comes early because we're.
I have it.
building
It's around $8 to $8.5 million.
What did you say?
8 to 8.5 in 26 and 27.
Right.
mhm.
So
I
this
mean-
is building at, I think we're at 8 sites, right?
Yeah.
That we're putting infrastructure in. And we're also building the trunk infrastructure to make it expandable in the future.
Right.
Mm.
And do you have a table of what it costs to pay a third party?
We haven't costed that out.
So I can't give you feedback until I know.
Yeah, I think the big one is just to know that it's on the table for consideration and
There are some entities that are completely uncomfortable with public-private partnerships in this arena. So we just wanted the opportunity to present that as well at the council.
It's an option to
Right.
present it.
Yeah.
You comfortable with that?
Mhm, yeah. I'm
Okay.
comfortable with that.
Anything else? Did you get the feedback you needed?
No, what I'm hearing is we can do some analysis on, some pursuit of some exemptions where it makes sense. Obviously, there's the cost considerations for purchases in the interim while we are in that period where there can be purchases of internal combustion engines for the next couple of years. And then obviously go forward with the analysis of both cost of ownership and also a public-private partnership.
Correct. Thank you. Okay. With that, we move on to agenda item 7, which is future agenda items.
Okay, so we have a new group here with the Climate Action Subcommittee. And in talking with the chair, we did talk a little bit about some of the challenges last year staff were having with bringing items every month. The way we typically work this is we try to focus on items that are specific to community-wide climate action plan, municipal climate action plan, achieving carbon neutrality. So in the past, we have had challenges with bringing items from staff of different departments. And so What is currently being proposed is to move to a more of a quarterly schedule for this meeting. As you can see on the upcoming meetings list, there is a proposal for a meeting on June 4th and November 5th. Of course, the subcommittee has the right at any time to ask for a special committee meeting as well on the regularly scheduled timelines, but this seems to be a more realistic, I think, approach to what we can provide to the committee. So we're looking just for some feedback, whether you're comfortable with scheduling for June 4th and November 5th for this subcommittee. And then we'll take a look at that again in November in terms of scheduling for the next year.
I think it's fine, unless something comes up in between, because between June and November, that's kind of a long time. But
Yeah.
for now, since we do know we have something to discuss here and there.
Do you have any public comment?
Hi. Hi. I'm going to read. The dissolution of the climate. I'm Diane Wheeler. I'm from Santa Rosa, part of FOCAP. Did a lot of work with the city after the Tubbs fires, as Mike said. The dissolution of the climate programs, funding data resources at the federal level will inevitably already are diminishing good climate action at every level, federal to city and towns, all while the impact of the climate crisis are accelerating. We would not like to see the Santa Rosa CAS meet less often and would like to see the city invigorate the CAS and the scope of items it was and is tasked with at this time. My question, that's my statement. My question for the council members is, where can we learn a current list of items the CAS is charged with at this time and the current strategy at the city level to achieve the climate action goals laid out in the city's climate action plan, including seeking any funding from the state, since that's the current end of the line with the IRA and the BIL and other funding kneecapped so badly at the federal level. And it's hard to understand how there is a shortage of issues staff can provide the CAS given the climate crisis that we're in. And we'd like to understand that better. May we email the council members to find out the strategy? And all of that said, understanding the financial limitations the city has, but the crisis that we are in is doesn't care. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment, Chris?
When I saw this on the agenda, I shared the same concerns. I've been concerned about how infrequently this committee has met over the last few years when I've been engaged more with the city. I'm heartened by the prospect that there could be special meetings as needed. But again, I kind of want to echo her comments that it seems to me like instead of kind of what we've done historically, we're going to need to be doing a lot of creative thinking, ideally as a community over the coming years. And I think this is a good forum to do it. So I just want to sort of challenge us collectively to think about what could that look like, as opposed to always hearing about how we're responding to grants from the state or the federal level. Because we're going to need to be really, ingenious at the local level to think about how we do this. So maybe there's things we haven't done historically that could fill the agenda.
Yeah. Any additional public comments? I'll just take a moment and respond, which is, our climate response is a top priority for me. And learning to move forward within our constraints is a really heartbreaking experience. Our staff is here mostly to bring in money and respond to these mandates that come down from the state to try to get funding and to do the best that we can with what we have and to provide service. And I think that what we're really hitting up against is challenges in having the resources, not just financial resources, but human resources to move forward. And so it'd be my offer to you that we can meet, we can come up with citizen-led initiatives. I will convene this subcommittee if we're able to come, not if, hopefully when we're able to come up with something that we can drive. That may not draw as heavily on staff resources. I do think we need to be creative and think outside of the box, and I will meet with you anytime you like, and we can convene this meeting as necessary. You have my commitment. I know how important this is.
I agree. I mean, that's why I was looking at that going, God, it's a long time. I was even gonna suggest maybe we should try to meet every other month with that idea that you just
Right.
proposed with,
Right.
having it be more citizen
Right.
involvement. And maybe not so much, for lack of a better word, burden on staff.
Right.
Because I see it as really important too. And I think one of the speakers made a really good point that, here we are with no money and the federal government, abandoning everything at this moment. And the climate crisis is worse than ever.
Yeah.
So, and it's only going to get worse. So with that in mind, I think, yeah.
So what I think is this, is we have a meeting for June, which is, in 2 months.
Right.
That gives us plenty of time to try to figure out, if there's something that we can come up with for a meeting, at midsummer, which would put us kind of on an every other month. And I think that that's probably a reasonable solution. Okay. All right. Okay, that brings us to item 8, everyone's favorite item, adjournment.
Thank you.
No public comment.